Hi, my name is Darren Mish, and I'm an attorney with a national tax problem resolution practice based in Tampa, Florida. During my 15 years of practice, there are certain questions that arise again and again, and so I thought I'd take this opportunity to answer some of those questions in this video format. There are 20 videos altogether, and if you'd like to have access to the other 19 videos, please visit my website at getirshelpvideos.com. Now, the next question we're going to answer is the second part of a three-part question, and the question is, my former spouse ran up a big tax debt, can I get out of it? Now, what we're going to talk about in this video is something that's called the innocent spouse / separate liability election. What does that mean? Well, we talked about in a different video, we talked about what I call classic innocent spouse, and we're going to talk about, in the next video, we're going to talk about something called equitable relief, but in this video, we're going to talk about the separate liability election. In essence, what it allows you to do is it allows you to split the liability so that husband owes what tax was attributable to him, and wife would pay what tax was attributable to her. I'm not going to choose who is the innocent spouse in this video and who is the guilty spouse. But let's go over the elements for separate liability election real quick. The first element is you must have filed a joint return, and I talked about this in the other videos. If you don't file a joint return, then there's no liability election, or there's no liability to separate, and therefore you can't benefit from innocent spouse. In other words, it has to be a joint liability, so that are jointly filed returns, so that you can split the liability, so that you can have the separation of that tax. The second element is does the return have an understatement of tax? If there's no understatement of tax, then there really isn't anything to complain about as far as innocent spouse goes, so that is definitely an element. What's an understatement of tax? It means a minimization of the tax that was owed. In other words, an error, usually. So an overstatement of tax would mean you paid too much tax, and an understatement of tax means you didn't pay enough tax. You didn't self-report enough tax and pay enough tax. The third element for separate liability election is, are you legally separated or no longer married to the spouse you filed the joint return with? Now, there are some states, such as Florida that I'm in, that there is no such thing as a legal separation, and I'm not sure that that's what, well, you can't be legally, you have to be either legally separated or no longer married in order to qualify for the separate liability election. So in other words, you cannot obtain this if you're still married to the alleged guilty spouse. And the fourth and final element for the separate liability election is, were you a member of the same household with the guilty spouse within 12 months preceding the filing of the application of innocent spouse? What does that mean? Well, did you live together even though you were actually legally married or legally separated? And I think probably the reason that this element is here in this particular statute is because there are people out there that they ask me all the time, should we get divorced so that we can get out of our tax debt? No, getting divorced doesn't help you with your tax debt at all. I suppose it could in a separate liability election. In theory, it could help you if you're divorced, but this element here is to make sure that you aren't divorced yet living under the same roof. Surprisingly enough, it's actually pretty common in my experience for divorced spouses to live together. Now, why they do that, I don't really understand, and I've never really gotten all that good of an answer. So that's the second of the three types of innocent spouse. That's about all the time I have for today. If you'd like to have access to the other 19 videos, I suggest that you visit our website at getirshelpvideos.com.